I'm Sufia Kokar from Afghanistan and part of Digital Equity and Media team at the Community Library Project. It's my great pleasure to welcome Urvashi Butalia here with us today. She is a distinguished publisher, writer, oral historian, and one of the pioneers of feminist publishing in India. She co-founded Kali for Women, India's first feminist publishing house in 1984, and later established Zuban, an independent feminist publishing house. With over 5 decades of experience, she has made significant contribution to feminist publishing, research, and conversation on gender and social justice in India. Her acclaimed book, The Other Side of Silence, Voices from the Partition of India, transformed the study of partition through oral histories and received international recognition. She has been honored with the Padma Shri, the Coité Medal, was awarded the title of Française Chevalier des Arts des Lettres, the Pandora Award for Women's Publishing, and the Nikkei Asia Award for Culture, among many others. We are very pleased to have you here today in the TCLP library with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Sophia. Lovely to be here with you today and to see you again also.
Thank you. You have spent much of your career uncovering stories that are often unheard. Looking back, what first made you question the history you had learned, and how did that shape your path as an oral historian?
Well, I began to question the histories that I had learned quite early on, but not necessarily consciously, at university somehow, and also at school, but more at university. Somehow that question always came up of why is there this difference between women and men? Why is it that women are unequal in so many different ways? And there were really no answers in history or anywhere else that one could see. So I think the questioning began from there, although it wasn't necessarily articulated as a questioning of history as much as a questioning of the conditions of life around us. As young students, we started to try and do something about that, fight about conditions of travel to college or hostel conditions, that kind of thing. So activism, questioning, all of that came in one go. Actually, from that activism and from in college understanding instinctively that things were unequal and unjust and unfair and there was discrimination around us, and questioning that was what I think led me to much later when I was doing research on partition, start questioning about how and why the narratives of partition that we had learned were so one-sided. And was that the only story, or was there much more that we needed to find out?
While researching The Other Side of Silence, you listened to people whose experiences of partition had rarely been documented, particularly from women and families. What can personal stories reveal that official records often cannot?
I think the records that we have, especially in our part of the world, tend to focus more on what is called fact. So they tend to focus more on what is provable, what is countable. And so you will find records of things like how many people were displaced, how much housing was provided, even how many gallons of petrol were used to fly planes or drive buses, and how much fuel was used on trains, and that kind of thing. But what those records don't capture is how a moment like the history of partition, but not only that, other things also, how those are experienced by people, how they impact ordinary people's lives, and then how people remember those as they go on in their lives, and what that memory means to them. And what I began to understand in the years that I was doing the research on partition was that to understand that moment in our history, it wasn't enough only to look at what you might call, within quotes, factual information, You really needed to understand what had happened to people's lives and how people had experienced this in order to understand the depth of it, you know, how deep that experience goes, how it lasts for generations. It's like the experience of being displaced and you losing your land. I mean, you will understand this. And for generations, the memory goes, even though you might have grown up in a foreign country, been born there, and have no reference to the country that has been left behind, but the way your parents' memories, your grandparents' memories are passed down really informs how you feel about it. So that's what facts cannot capture, and that's what personal stories bring out.
That's really true, yeah. Through Khiyal for Women and later Zuban, you have spent decades publishing voices that mainstream publishings often ignore. Looking back, what changes have you witnessed in those stories, and which get in the stories which get told, and also what challenges are still remaining?
I think there's both, you know, you see change and you also see, when you start to see change, you also start to see the challenges. So it's great that you have asked about both. I think there are many changes. One of the things is that in the world of media or in the world of publishing, let's say book publishing, you will find that a lot of the search for new things and new ideas comes from the smaller, more independent, more political publishers.
Yes.
Because their choices of what they publish are not dictated by the necessity to make profit for as they are for a big publisher. So I'm not making a value judgment, I'm just stating the facts that this is what happens. So it allows people like us to be more adventurous, to seek out new voices, and then those voices often, once they are brought to public attention, can move into a larger space and they get picked up by the big publishers as well. So in a sense, what happens is that the small steps that people like the small independent publishers take help to open a door and through which others can come. It's a little bit like, you know, in the old days, women were not allowed education to study. They were not permitted to go to college or anything like that. They were not permitted to study medicine, for example. So the first women who battled and fought to become doctors, to study medicine and become doctors, they opened a door to others for whom it became possible.
Yes.
And today that door is like wide open and there are other battles to fight. So one thing is that. The other is, the challenge is then to understand that this seeking of voices that have been disappeared or marginalized, and the attempt to create spaces where these voices can be articulated, can be heard, can be confidently, you know, expressed, that is not a search that ever ends.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, you know, okay, we have published so many women who come from underprivileged backgrounds and now end of the story, we've done it. It's not like that. There is always another challenge. There is always more to do. There is always a language that we have not thought of. There is always a new learning.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Today we are, like you said, we are surrounded by a lot of information, and but it isn't always easy to distinguish between history, memory, and also opinions. How can people become more thoughtful readers, better listeners, and more critical thinkers when they engage with things from the past or ideas from the past?
I think you're right to say that today there's a lot of information and it's difficult to figure out between that. I think one of the things, and it's easy for me to say because I'm the generation that doesn't feel pushed to be on social media all the time. So, but I think one of the important things is to have time and space to reflect. to absorb everything that we are reading or we are hearing, and there's a lot of it, and then to exercise your own judgment about, where does the truth lie in this, what is just opinion, and what is another legitimate narrative that you need to take on board. And that space we don't have to sit down and reflect. And in some ways, the kind of work that you people do here and other similar libraries do is to open up that space. I mean, just now when I walked in, it was such a lovely sight to see all those tables, and people are sitting there and just reading, right? And you don't see that these days very much. I look at myself and see, I'm a reader. I love reading. I didn't used to be able to go to bed without reading a chapter of a book or a story or something. Now I don't do that. I can go off to sleep without reading, and I feel it as a loss. So now, something that came to me almost naturally as part of my day, I have to make space for. But because I believe it's important, I make space for it. But a lot of people don't have that possibility and don't have that space in their homes, in their lives. That's why something like a community space like this is, I think, really important.
Like you said, community libraries are inclusive places where people meet, question, and exchange their ideas. In your experience, how important are these shared spaces and helping people understand different perspectives?
I think they're very important, and I think we need to have many more of them, but sadly that doesn't happen. I have seen this community library grow from the time that it started, and it was in, somewhere near Chirag, Delhi.
Yes.
It was in that building in the NGO.
In school building.
Yeah, school building. And I used to go there and see how excited the children were just to have the possibility to come and read. And also how nice it was for people to come there and just have conversations. And I've seen it in my own office. We have an office in Shahpur Jat. And even though we don't run a library like you do, but we have a cool space in the office. And we used to make that space available to all the local people, and the children every afternoon in the summer would come into our office. We have children's books which we publish. They would read those books, they would bring their own, they would draw, paint, sit there, and they would pass like 2-3 hours in the afternoon. And it was also relief for the mothers because children were out of their hair but in a safe space. So it's just so important to have these spaces, and it not necessarily, as you say, a space to read, but just to be, and to find someone to talk to, or just to be silent, or that kind of thing. But we don't have enough of them, and we have to try and find ways of making them.
I agree with you. Thank you so much for having a conversation with me.
Thank
and
you.
Sharing your thoughts. I'm really looking forward to your talk right now, and also to reading your book. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sophia.